Good afternoon. Welcome to the AMANI Project. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton, and I am delighted, so happy today, sitting in my happy place because we are about to welcome a wonderful human being. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dori Tunstall, Dean of Design at OCAD University, to today's conversation. Dori, hello, how are you?
I am good. Greetings, Nicole. I'm so excited about our conversation today.
Well, so am I. And let me tell you, Dory, this is one of those times where I truly wish that the interview segment was, like 6 hours long, because there's a lot to ask Dory Tunstall.
Mhm.
There's so much to get into. But before we do, I'm so curious to know, how are you? How is Dory doing?
I'm thriving is probably the best
Mm,
way to say it. There's a lot of stuff that I'm doing to kind of make sure that I'm thriving, eating well, exercising, trying to find the joy in all of this pandemic related pandemonium. So I'm between thriving and surviving is probably
mhm.
the best way to say it, but working really hard to stay thriving.
I love the thriving part. I do, because so many of us are really trying to figure out how to be able to navigate through life right now.
Mhm, mhm.
The plane that we are in. And so I'm curious. Can I ask? Because I'm a curious type of woman, Dory. I'm curious to know, what are some of the things that you have been doing to thrive. Some of the things that you have been doing to take care of self.
Um, well, one of the important things is working out. So I work out with a trainer 3 times a week and getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, which means you get up at 5:30 in the morning. And that's been really important because, even pre-COVID, like, my job as dean of design can be a little stressful and, sometimes that stress manifests itself in the body. So I committed myself, right before COVID started to really, um, taking care of my body so that I can take care of my mind and be able to take care of everyone else. So it's been such a thrill because, things that I was crying the first time I did almost 2 years ago, now I'm like, "Oh, that's super easy. Can we do more?" And so to
Wow.
feel that progress in your body, more strength, more endurance, more flexibility, every week has just been, it's been a blessing in terms of, like, keeping my health, but also reminding me of how important it is to maintain my health in a
Mm.
context of, again, everyone's health being under threat from the pandemic.
Yes, yeah. And I'm finding, Dory, that so many of us are looking at self and our health in a deeper way than we did before, in terms of the self care
Mhm,
part
mhm,
and
mhm.
what we're doing to address that practice, and um, I was sharing, I've shared this many times on air, that I have learned to bake, and I've learned to start
Mm,
doing different things that have really just been supporting my self care because I am trying new things creatively.
mhm.
And so, has there been anything new that you've tried that you've added to your practice of
So
self care?
so the first year of the pandemic, I actually grew a urban garden. So I got this urban garden kit, it was out in my balcony, and I grew, like, tomatoes, way too many tomatoes, uh,
Right.
basil, kale, and it was really amazing for that first year because it kept me grounded in nature, kept me grounded on
Mm.
small things, like, does this have enough water? Is the sun bright enough? Okay, does this have any mites that are infecting it? So it kept me really focused on small things. But growing a garden is a lot of work. So I didn't continue that practice into the second year, although I have lots of plants which are flourishing because I'm home all the time to be able to take care of them. But that was one of the things that I was like, I'm going to try this out because now I have time to be able to do it. And even though
Mm.
I admire urban garden, and I actually was a pretty good urban gardener, the challenge is that to grow a garden, you produce a lot of food. And because I stay pretty much in isolation, it was really hard to redistribute that food to others. So I
Yeah.
ended up wasting or canning or freezing a lot of food that I ended up not consuming. So that was part of the reason why to not continue it the second year.
Okay, so you've been busy though. You clearly have been busy because because putting together an urban garden is not an easy feat. You know, and I remember my mother used to be a gardener and I would sweat just watching her. You know,
It's
that's
easier if it's on your balcony, right? It's easier if your balcony. Like there's some people that started, like turn their entire yards into gardens in a way that I was like, I admire you, and please send me some cucumbers when you're done. But I'm like, I don't have that kind of time for that kind of focus, right?
yes. Yeah. Well, I love that you're doing this. You know, I love it because I think it's so important for us to pour into self
Mhm.
as well. You know, we many of us, including you, and watching the wonderful work that you do, Dory, you are constantly pouring out and serving others. And so pouring into self by doing something like an urban garden, you know, is such a beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing that with me. I plan on coming by to pick up my tomatoes.
Okay.
I do. I do. And so, Dory, design anthropologist, public intellectual, design advocate, so many titles that one could give you, and you do them so well. I really would love to start by asking, you know, where did all of this begin for you, Dory? You know, we've read through so much of your history and followed you, but where did your beginnings in this work transpire?
Well, it's really interesting. Like the wonderful thing about family is that they remind you and keep you humble. So every time I'm talking about like, oh, this is what I want to do, it's like my aunt Jill in particular is like, you said you wanted to be a teacher when you were age 6. You said like, and you were always interested in education since you were a kid. The design part came from art, so I was always doing drawings and doodles. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, so I would take art classes at the Heron School of Art. So like it's the thing is like probably I'm living out my childhood patterns, right? That I already established around what was important to me. Education was important to me, and my family. Creativity was important to me and my family. Again, growing up African American, the struggle and my contribution to creating conditions so the next generation doesn't have to struggle was really important to me and my family. So I'm just modeling in many ways like the values of my family in terms of education, creativity, and social justice. That was, we were born doing that, and what the way in which I've been fortunate is to have so many opportunities to live those values at a scale of impact that I can see the ripple effects of the things that I've been doing and the communities, right, that I build around these principles of living for me. That the impact, I can see the impact, and the impact resonates and ripples with others, right?
And it truly does. We're seeing it in so many different ways and on so many different levels, Dory. And I'm curious to know, you know, who inspired you? You know, as you were thinking about all of that, even as a young human, who are some of the individuals that inspired you in that work?
I mean, this is the thing where, like, everyone asks me this question, and you have to understand, I'm inspired by everything. Like, there's an aspect of my personality which is very what one describe as childlike because I'm fascinated by everything and everyone. I uh, I find inspiration in the beauty of the universe. I find inspiration in people's kindness. And so, yes, there's people like my family or teachers or and teachers in the sense of like teachers that I've had or teachers like like rest in power bell hooks. Like I'm a super sponge, so I learn from everyone, and I'm inspired by everything and everyone who I'm learning for. And from, and that's just being I try to be very open to the experience of life and of people, um, and so it doesn't take much to inspire me to do something or try something or to learn something. It's just, it's like beautiful sunset. I'm inspired. Someone being kind to someone on the street. I'm inspired.
Yeah.
My even now, like today, like the response of my community to the fact that like I've been hacked on Instagram and the kindness, right, in which
Mm.
they're responding to that. It's like I'm inspired by that. So I'm inspired by anyone and everything that is trying to not even do good in the world, just be authentically in the world. That's what
Mm.
inspires me.
Yes, yes. And can we speak about Instagram, please? Because so many of us have been inspired by you. And one of the my first in one of my first few introductions to you on Instagram was seeing you lay it down dancing. And it was such a beautiful thing to watch you move and be creative, be uniquely you. And it's been drawing so much attention. And I have seen just how much it's actually inspiring others to get up and engage and be mobile and move. And so, where did that begin? The
I've always
dancing part. Talk to us about the dancing part.
So, and this is the thing where like people forget like you have a role and you are a person. So they're like, you're a dean. What are you supposed to be doing dancing? It's like, I've been dancing forever. Like,
Yes.
my favorite thing to do when I was a kid is like go in the basement, put on like some music and just jam out. Like nobody's watching me and just move. Very early, my mom and dad, they put us in ballet classes and tap dancing. Again, not to do it professionally, but just so that we were in our bodies, right? To know to be able to trust ourselves to be able to move. And so since then, I've always been doing dancing. I've always been taking dance lessons in one way or another. And I guess the video dancing started because at OCAD, I used to run these things called plaza dances. At first, I did them every week. So every week we would go to like the biggest open space, like the lobby or somewhere, and I would just play music and do like simple, kind of like choreographed line dances, and try to convince my colleagues and the students to join me. And when we switched over, so it got to the point where I was too busy to do that every week, and so we went to biweekly, and then we went to monthly, and then we went to quarterly, and then it was like, oh my god, I just don't have time for that. But when we went sort of remote, I was like, okay, I need to bring back dancing in my life. And so it was the thing where it's like, okay, there was all these meme dances, right, that kind of go there. So I was like, okay, I'll do a meme dance Monday. So every Monday I will try to learn some easy choreographed, although sometimes I would choose more difficult ones. Like the week I decided to do Janet Jackson ended up being 2 weeks because I had just took me 2 weeks to learn the choreography.
Right.
And then now what I just do most of the time is like I'll just do a freestyle because I've taken enough lessons that I can kind of get into the groove of it. But if I see something really spectacular, or if like again, I follow a lot of dancers. So if they have like a challenge, a dance challenge, then I'll try to learn that and have that be my meme dance Monday. But it is lovely to the extent to which like, well, first of all, people are like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're posting that," which makes me think like, "Am I that bad?" Because I think I'm pretty good. Like, why were you be like, "That's so brave of you"? It's like, is it that bad? Um, but the beautiful thing that happens is like people again are sort of saying, and they'll DM me, right? Like they're saying, "Oh my god, this is so great," and like I'm now starting to take a little bit of lessons online, and then when I feel a little more comfortable, I'll post it too. And so that's the kind of thing that brings me joy because technically speaking, I'm not doing it for other people. Although on days when I feel lazy, I remember that, oh yeah, there's people who are invested in
And
you
who are
doing it.
watching.
Yeah. Um, but for me, it's like all the things that I try to do, and when I think of it, I'm trying to model for my students is like be authentic, be who
Mm.
you are, dancing is authentic to who I am. And so somehow the ideal that because I have this title, that I can't be engaged in something that brings me so much joy. Like it just brings me so much joy to dance. Um, like whatever position you have should never take away something that joyful from who you are, because you have to live up to this ideal of what it means to be a dean or a president or a CEO or any of these positions where people feel like, for respectability perspectives, right, that you can't dance.
Yes.
What the most important thing to do is dance, right?
Yes, indeed. Well, there are so many individuals on the Amani Project team who are also living the life of
Mm.
dance, so we can understand and
So
relate.
DM me if you want me to do a little challenge. I'd be happy to.
Sign me up for some Dori classes. I am there.
Oh, I mean in the reverse, because one of the projects that I wanted to do during COVID, and it was just a thing, it got complicated, is I actually wanted to start commissioning sort of again choreographers and dancers who I know to like do a little short thing, because it was a thing of like, okay, how can I make sure that they have some resources, right? During, when performance venues and things are shut down. So it was something I planned to do, but then I started trying to work with my assistant to do all the coordination, and it was stressing her out. So I was like, okay, I just need to pull back on that until other things have chilled out. But it's still an idea, and it's still something I want to make manifest. So as things calm down a
Right.
little bit more, I'll be calling you.
Well, we're waiting. We'll we'll be those of us at Amani Project and beyond are going to be waiting for that call. I can tell you right now, yes, sign me up for the Dori classes. And so I would also love to really take a look at something that I've heard you say is so significant, so powerful, which is that diversity is getting the invitation, inclusion is getting invited to the dance. Wow, Dori. Um,
You don't tell me all the but my you don't go into my critique of that.
well, I when I hear that, it brings about for me so many different thoughts, because I do think that when, especially over the course of the past couple of years, when we hear the words diversity and inclusion, um, it brings up so much for many of us. And also, some of us are also challenged with the words diversity and inclusion because in some platforms it's overused or not used properly. And so, hearing you say those words resonate with me. And I'm I would love if you could explore those words, please. The
Yeah.
invitation and being invited to the dance.
Well, again, I sort of frame that conversation in a little bit of a critical way, because like the simple way of, right, when someone is like, oh, we need diversity, then they're like, okay, we need to invite all these, black, brown, yellow, queer people. And and again, there is power and shift that comes with that, right, of having diverse peoples in the room. But again, I've been in diverse situations, and so I always talk about, like, yes, it's being invited, but that's not enough if you're not changing the underlying power structure, because most of the time we're brought in as like an individual token. So I have one of these, one of these, one of these, and one of these. And that means we're actually not in an environment where we can fully express ourselves. Like if you're the only one, then you're limited in your ability to fully express all of who you are and bring that into the institution. So I always talk about diversity is, yes, getting the invitation, but that's not enough. And then we move to inclusion. It's like, okay, I'm invited and I'm standing here on the sides, uh, but I need to be invited to dance. And then that again is really important, and it's a shift. But then the question comes like, well, what dancing are we doing? Because I say in my life, I've been invited and ask to dance, but they only are happy, let's say if I'm doing the waltz or I'm doing the foxtrot or doing again some Eurocentric dance. If I start rocking a salsa or something like that, then I get in trouble that I'm
Mm,
being disruptive, right? Um, and so in that case, it's like inclusion is great, right? And getting invited is great. But then we have to ask the question of like, what dance are we doing? Like, my dance card is full, but I don't know if you've ever had to do like the waltz. That's hard on your back.
mm,
That's
yeah.
some serious, like painful dancing. And so what I talk about then is like, well, actually what we're really interested in is in decolonization. And decolonization, again, indigenous sovereignty. But getting to indigenous sovereignty means that you are actually dismantling all of those systems of exclusion. You're dismantling all of those systems of like assimilation. Like you're dismantling all of
Yes.
those that then I say it's like, so that is like the street party where those who are most vulnerable get to select the music, get to select the food. And when that happens, everybody has a good time.
Mm,
And so we're at that point now at OCAD where we've done the diversity, we've done the inclusion. Again, we're sort of still doing decolonization because like it'll take us another 500 years to get there. But even in where we're at in terms of our decolonization process, that there's this beautiful thing where everyone, even people that again, this process was most threatening to, like, they're being reinvigorated, that they are seeing new possibilities, that they are repositioning themselves in such a way that they themselves feel that they can bring all of who they are in dialogue with the beautiful diversity that exists with everyone else.
mm,
And so I'm already starting to see, like, this is how the street party can happen. Like we're beginning to see how the street party can happen. And once we're able to really show that to others, like that's why I'm so active, right? I'm trying to show you what the possibilities are. But once we're able to show that to others, like that's the last bit of anxiety that's kind of holding people back, right?
mm.
Like if we give indigenous sovereignty, what is it going to be like for us? Are they going to treat us the same way we treated them, right? But if they're like,
Yeah.
we're here to do this the street party where everyone's open, everyone's invited. Yes, we'll choose the list, but guess what? We got really good taste.
Right.
Everyone will play this, right? That I think people are beginning to see what that might look like and to be able to show people more what that experience will look like. Again, from the inside of that experience, like that's where I want to get is to be able to show people like it's okay. The street party is good. Come
Mm.
join us in creating your own street party. Because again, that's why it's a street party. It
Right.
has to be on
Right.
your street, right?
And so in talking about that street party, something I'm thinking about here, I had an emerging artist who shared with me that doing the work of being an activist is something that
Mhm.
they want to do. What this emerging artist had shared with me is that in watching the great work that not only you, Dori, and so many have done, and they are also on the brink of their work, is that they
Mhm.
often get tired. They get tired of
Mm.
having to show up in spaces and have to explain and ask for permission at the table,
Mhm.
in their
Mhm.
words, and having the fatigue, the fatigue of having to do the work of talking about diversity, inclusion, the fatigue. And so I'm curious to know from you, do you ever get tired of having to do this work and having to show up and have conversations around diversity and inclusion on the many platforms that you are doing it on, the very many public platforms? Does Dory get tired?
I do get tired, but I try to remember, again, my role is to contribute to the struggle. And so I think about when I'm tired, like the work of my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, all of my ancestors in terms of the sacrifices they had to make to create the conditions in which I can live as fearlessly and as free as I currently do. Like I can live as authentically as I currently am. And so my obligation to future generations is to create even more fearlessness and more freedom for them. So I get tired, but I try to draw upon the energy of the ancestors, and I stay directed and focused because I know my purpose, right? My purpose is to have those conversations so someone else doesn't have to, a
Mm.
generation, following me, to open those possibilities so that someone doesn't have to be the one to open them up. And so, in a lot of the cases, in a lot of situations, I've been like the first, and there's a lot of obligation that comes with that role. Um, but it's also, again, there was a first before me in some other past, right? That even created the door that I'm able to walk through, and others then have the opportunity to walk in after me. And I have to actively, right? I actively make sure that others are able to walk in after me, um, now that the door is open. So I get
Yes.
tired, and that's why I had to work out and sleep well and, call upon my community and find joy. But I know the meaning of that work. I know that I'm making things better for the next generation. And as it's interesting because I'm to the point where like the elders are passing away, right? The elders are passing away, and it's like, oh, I am the elder, right? I'm getting to the point where I have to recognize I am the elder, and so I take on even more of that responsibility, which again is burdensome. We shouldn't have to do it. Should have been resolved 200 years ago, 400 years ago. Um, but I've seen enough difference in my life versus the life of my great grandmother to know that that struggle is worth it. That we keep pushing forward, and then I think of the freedoms of not having to think about things that like my nieces and nephew experience. It's like again that means my generation we've done that work, right? So that I think there was one example in junior high school, or maybe it was earlier, maybe it's in early elementary school where my sister was posting, to say, "Do I teach," like, my niece and nephew was asking about the Ku Klux Klan,
Right.
and she was like, "Do I teach it? Do I tell them about it?" Because again, they live in a world like when we were growing up, like at age 2, we knew what the Ku Klux Klan was because that was a real threat, right? Like that was a real threat. Like, don't ever run out of gas in your car because there's a threat of you in the wrong town
Mm.
at the wrong time. Like the Ku Klux Klan like, and it's not a fake; it's a real, story. But even growing up in Georgia, right, which is where my niece and nephew grew up, like, enough had changed that, like, the Ku Klux Klan was an abstraction for them, that we had to kinda have the conversation of, like, do we still continue to put energy into their existence in that way, right? And so there's a lot of work that's been done, again, to make that happen, and I'm tired, I just sleep and I rest. I'm a big fan of like the nap ministry to sort of say it like rest, sleep, these are revolutionary acts because the role of capitalism, the role of white supremacy, the role of all of these structures of oppression is to make sure we're too tired to fight
Mm.
back, right?
Mm.
So we have to take rest. We have to take care of self because that's where we find the energy to keep fighting and changing and pushing for change. So that again, so that the next generation coming will have more time for leisure.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate your reference to ancestors because I think about the fact that many of our ancestors did not have the privilege, the
Mhm.
opportunity, whenever they wanted to access it, to have rest and
Mhm.
to take those naps, to sleep, to pause, and the hard work the diligence, the activism, the work that they have done have now given us the opportunity to at times get the rest that we
Mhm,
need.
mhm.
And so I
Like, one
really
of the things I do with pride, and
Mhm.
again, it's a stupid pride, but it's still a pride, like, I refuse to iron my clothes.
Mm.
And the reason why is that, like, my great-grandmother, like, if she was done if she so she worked at the women's prisons, kind of facilitating, like, the laundry. So she was always like, her work was to, like, either to do the pressing herself or to facilitate women doing the pressing. But so when she would come home, she would still be like pressing clothes. Still be like she's the one of those women who like ironed her underwear, which again, I was like, I don't understand that. But again, I respect the work and the labor, but there was also a message in that to sort of say, I'm, like she would never let herself rest, right? She can never let herself rest.
Mm.
And, and again, we would talk about it as we're growing up, where she's like, "You work 50 weeks for your 2 weeks vacation." And they would like my love for travel is like from my great-grandmother, my grandmother, who would send me all these postcards from Hawaii and Egypt and all these places. Again, but they would work really hard those 50 weeks for those 2 weeks vacation. But I also learned, like, again, and the thing is, like, there's that sense of the daily sense of not never being able to rest.
Mhm.
And so there's me, it's like, okay, it's like if I'm gonna save a little bit of labor by not pressing my clothes, and I can afford for the things that I really need to have, like, straight to, like, have someone else press them, I'm gonna try to do that because I wanna honor her
Mm.
hard work with
Yes.
rest, because she was working that hard to make sure that I could rest, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's because of our ancestors that we have that. And those that are going to come after us are also going to benefit as well from the work that we're doing right now.
So those who are gonna come after us need to, like, invest in, like, wrinkle-free clothing.
Yeah. And the wrinkle free.
All my designers out there, wrinkle-free clothing.
Oh wow, I'm so enjoying this chat with you. I'm very curious to know because I was mentioning emerging artists, and I know there are so many more who follow you and the work that you are doing, Dory. Um, how do they begin? How do you even begin to prepare, talking about, teaching about, engaging about diversity, inclusion, and beyond? Like, what are some? If you can share,
Mm,
I mean, the list is so long where you are concerned, and your background and your history, but what are some of the things that an individual, an emerging artist can do to prepare really to
mhm,
do this
mhm,
authentically
mhm,
and to do it from a place of truth and honor?
mm, mhm. Um,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be like I'm gonna say it's 3 things, but it's gonna be more complicated than that, but I'm gonna reduce it to 3 things because 'cause you'll remember it. First is always doing the work to understand your history and your trauma. It is the work of social justice, the work of decolonization. This is work of healing. So you have to have enough healing within yourself to help the other people and the world be able to heal. And so the first preparation is that you have to prepare yourself so that you are dealing with and working through your own traumas. And again, if you are a indigenous, racialized black person, you got trauma. And so we have to do that work. As you move to a point where again you've dealt enough with your own trauma that you are not as much inflicting that on others who are not able to take it, right? They're not also on a journey of healing. Um, then it's being like noticing where you feel discomfort, noticing where you don't belong. And by noticing, like, that's the spark that says, I need to make something different happen. I need to change this process. I need to change this context. I need to make this experience one that I don't feel discomfort in because I'm being excluded, because I'm being discriminated against, because I'm being oppressed. And from that feeling of discomfort that something is not right, and the healing that you've done to know, like, and the not right is like you're all right. It's something else that is not right. Then it's really it's wherever, no matter how small the decision you have, to always ask the question of like, how is this going to how does this decision going to dismantle oppression? How is this decision going to create conditions of kindness? How is this condition going to create an environment in which others can find a self a manifestation, right? So every little tiny decision, and I say this like I say this to designers, and it's like if your only decision is like what photograph needs to be on that page, then choose that photograph with the mindset of like, how is this going to dismantle racism?
Mm.
How is and you'll be surprised to figure out like you have a solution to that. Like you can find the image, right? That is actually conveying let's say diversity and inclusion in an authentic way,
Mm.
right? You can do that work. And then, like I said, as your sphere of decisions grow, have more impact on more people in a direct way that you can fill, then you'll have the practice to be able to make those decisions when someone's asking you, okay, we have this $55 million budget. What are needs to be our priorities over the next 5 to 10 years? Like when you've made those small decisions with that mindset of like social justice, with that mindset of decolonization, when you get to those big decisions, then you'll come at it with the same ethos.
Mm. Yeah, I think what's interesting about this, Dory, is having heard you also say in a previous talk that, or bring up the question, how can we think about diversity and inclusion so that it brings about the death of, which is what I'm about to address next, of the super token.
Yeah.
And um, I love that you've given those shares, the preparedness and the things that individuals need to be thinking about. Uh, because it's not just about walking into this work and saying the words
Mm,
diversity and saying the word
mhm, mhm,
inclusion.
mhm.
It's really there's a preparedness that needs to happen. And so thank you for sharing that and having to consider all of the above of what you've just mentioned. And so the death of the super token.
That is my goal.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
well, let me break down what the super token is because it's not common parlance right now, but that will change. So the super token I define as a individual from some kind of group of structural exclusion who is so talented in one way or another that the institutions um, want their talent enough to overcome their aversion to their identities or their group identities. So I always say like anyone who's a first, Barack Obama is like first black president. Okay, like for that to happen, he's a super token. Because first of all, his qualifications and intelligence and coolness and all these things had to be so off the charts, right?
Mm,
Perfect. that that for a brief moment of 8 years, that the institutions wanted enough of that talent to 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 be willing to reckon with the fact that, like again, they had a complete aversion to his identity as a black man, right? So that's what a super token is. Now, super tokens are useful because sometimes you're trying to break down a system. The only way, again, an institution will let someone in, right, is that, like, again, that they defy all the categories of mediocrity. So they have to be super exceptional. They have to be an exceptionally talented and gifted athlete. They have to be, extraordinarily intelligent, problem solving person. Um, and it's and the desire for that institution to want that talent, like, should never be confused with the ideal that this institution wants the person, right? Like, you should never
Mm.
get confused about the fact it's like, no, they want the talent, and if that talent existed in a different body, in a different mindset, in a different culture that was more aligned to theirs, they would take that over you.
Right.
But it just
Mm.
happens to be it's so exceptional, that they're over willing to overlook the fact that, quote, unquote, "they don't" that your community, they dishonor and despise, right,
Mm.
to pull you in.
Mm. So that I'd love to look at this from a personal perspective then, because or rather a more intimate
Mm.
perspective in looking at you, Dory, because you have self self admitted that
Yeah.
you are a super token, and so I'm a super token
Mhm,
as
mhm,
well, right? I'm a super token, and so what roadblocks, knowing that you have been a super token as well, what roadblocks did you face along your path? I can only imagine there have been more than I can count, but are you? Can you share some of those roadblocks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to say it is that, and this has been kind of like documented and talked about. Like, there's a honeymoon. So let me say, um, generally, I don't expect to be at an institution for more than 5 or 6 years, and part of that has to do with the fact, like, again, as a super token, I have talents that institutions like. Like, I'm highly creative, strategic thinker. I'm, like I'm able to see possibilities that others don't imagine, and I'm able to set forth plans to make those possibilities manifest at a level that other people may not see as much or be able to make happen as quickly, right? And so impossible is not impossible for me is the best way to say it. Um, so again, there's a honeymoon period where everyone is like, "Oh my gosh, you're so amazing! You're so amazing! You're so amazing! Look at all the things that you've been able to do." And then once the changes that come from just having me in the environment gets really disruptive and begins to make people feel uncomfortable, then there's normally a point where there's a lot of pushback, and then pushback personally becomes a form of bullying, right? So. Um, and then that bullying again is the system trying to either make me conform, right, to assimilate into their ways, or to push me out because. And again, it's not because they still don't want the talent. It's just that again, the system rejects the fact that this talent comes in this body with this
Right.
history, right? And then and then normally I would hang on until I'm able to, as much as possible, build up the systems, redo the systems within the institution so that when I leave, everything doesn't collapse back.
Mm.
Um, and then I'm done because, like again, the system wants my talent. If I bring that talent into the institution, then it has my talents, doesn't need to have me. Right? And so I
Mhm.
plan my career like, part of the reason why I like administration is that most administrative contracts are 5 to 10 years. And so knowing enough about, like, how I operate within the system, like, me thinking, like, I'm gonna be at an institution for 20, 30 years, like, that is just not a reality.
Yeah.
It just is not a reality. So I have to design my career in such a way that I know that, after 5 or 6 years and it may be I'm, like, again, that it may be equally bored, like, I'm ready for the next challenge, but I do like, I would say there's very few work situations where I haven't experienced some form of bullying, and
Mhm.
again, I ground myself, I make sure I'm nourishing myself, I have a community of people who continue to nourish me because that bullying is, again, the institution trying to push diversity away. So if I'm able to stay grounded and strong, again, because I have all of this community behind me, then I'm able to push through that bullying and really open up systems so that, again, the next individual doesn't have to go through the same things that I do.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. And, you know, a mentor of mine, Vivian Scarlett of Dance Immersion, had shared with me many years ago about the importance of always having community, you know, and making sure that I don't do this walk alone.
Mhm,
Um, and sometimes it can get easy to do that. You begin, you know, in the at least for me, anyways, to think, okay, you know, I can do this, I can do that. I got to make sure that I've got this in order, etc. But having that community of individuals around me that takes care
mm,
and supports Nicole, that might even have the same aligned way of thinking at times, but are invested in my health and my well being,
mhm,
has been key for me. And so that's been a very valuable piece of advice. And so hearing you say it is just, it's another confirmation for me the importance of having community,
mhm, mhm.
especially given the fact that there are roadblocks
Yeah.
that we're going to hit because this type of work is it's always I feel and
Mhm,
I almost feel um, I almost don't want to say it, but there is always.
mhm, mhm.
I don't even want to be so general, even in saying always, but it feels like that's what I'll
Yeah,
say. A lot of
yeah.
times, it feels like it's all there are always going to be roadblocks. But I got to tell you, I'm optimistic, Dory.
I am always hopeful, but that hope comes from the fact that I know I'm contributing to do that work, right? Like that I know that the hope comes from the work that's being done. So every time I'm like, again, I'm tired. This institution, and again, it doesn't even have to be my institution. This institution is weighing me down. Okay, like okay, what is it that I can do? If it's a thing that I only can push an inch, then that hope lies in being able to push an inch. If I can push things further, then my hope lies in being able to push things forward. And so I think one of the again, the role of the super token is the one to push things forward, to open the doors that are not closed, and to change the system so that, like, the death of the super token has to do with the fact that if you've been successful in bringing others in and making the institutional change, then I always say, where I want mediocrity. I want to be able to hire for mediocrity. I want to be able to hire mediocre indigenous people, black people, Latinx people. I want to be able to hire for mediocrity because that means the system the system is designed to support white male mediocrity. That is what white supremacy as an institutional structure, that is what it's meant to support. So if it's now supporting, black, female, queer, uh, cognitively different mediocrity, then you've removed all those barriers in that system that have kept everyone out, right? That has kept everyone out. So death of the super token means the rise of true inclusion, because it means the system is now geared for the mediocrity of everyone. Equal
Mhm.
opportunity mediocrity. That's what I'm aiming for.
Mm. And I think about the fact that you know some of the measures that we see being put in place from different organizations, and I'm talking about inclusion measures, diversity measures, often fail. And so individuals who are going into this type of work um, also should be aware of the fact that there will be times when they're going to witness that failure. And it is a lot of work for that super token to be in that position um, and to witness that, to
Mhm.
witness when it does fail.
Well, and to so again, the scary thing about this work, and like I've just written a book, finished writing a book on decolonizing design, which will come out 2023 from MIT Press. But one of the things that I talk about, as to why I wrote the book, was because there's all these people who are now being put in these positions to push forward diversity, inclusion, decolonization. And they've not been given a guidebook, and they've not been told. They will experience, but they've not been told or guided into the process. Is that a lot of times what you're doing in this role is allowing the institution to assault you,
Mm.
right? And then you have to show the institution like your pain and the blood. And then you have to often help the institution understand what it means to heal you and thus remove the structures that are causing the pain. And so when you're the super token, you're often doing that by yourself and you're taking, in many ways, the hardest punches. Like you're taking the hardest punches. And again, it's really hard to like take the punch, show it back to the institution, and then do the work to heal. Um, Again, part of having like a critical mass is that in some ways all these things that happen doesn't get concentrated on one or two people. So it's spread out, but also by spreading out, you help in the collective healing, and you accelerate the process by which the institution understands its ability to cause harm, and thus you accelerate its ability to heal through changing those structures that cause harm. And so that's why critical mass is so important, and not having just the super token. Because again, there I've been in institutions that like again almost broke
Mm.
me because again, I'm the person who's taking on the full weight of the institution's, discrimination and oppression and sexism and all these sort of things.
Yes.
And so critical mass to be able to share the weight and accelerate the change is so important. It's so important to being able to change. But sometimes, like again, it's that super token who has to first open the door. And that's
Mm.
important because I've been in situations where you have super tokens and they're so happy to be there that they become the gatekeeper, right? And
Yes.
it
Yes.
expresses itself in two ways, like the institution, and I see this a lot, so I do a lot of work to dismantle this. Is like, oh, if we had 15 more Dories, of course we would hire them. And it's like, I
Mm.
don't even exist, right? Like there are so many reasons why there's not 15 Dories going around, right? And you know that because you built the structures to make sure that there aren't.
That's
Um,
right.
but the other aspect of it is the super token who's again who's resting on their laurel, so to speak, who's invested in like, oh, I've made it through the system, so everyone else should make it through as well. And again, for me, forgetting their purpose, which is that yes, you made it through the system. And again, I made it through the system because so many people, and I say invested in me pushing through those systems, whether it's telling me how, mentoring me so that I understand when you get to the table, Dory, they're going to be talking about this and you need to know what they're talking about so you're able to contribute to the conversation. Or whether it's like, you know what, you don't have to do dishes tonight because we know you need to study for that test and we want you to be prepared for it. Like there's so many levels in which people invested in me being able to succeed through these systems, and again, with the expectation is that once I get there, I start dismantling them so that others can get through without all the sacrifices that my community has made for me to be there and that I have had to make for myself to be there for others.
Well, thank you, Dory. It's incredibly eye-opening, powerful, and inspiring to hear these shares. And I really appreciate you being so open because I do think that it's so
Mhm,
important for us to know that in this work, those levels, those mountains and valleys
mhm,
that an individual in this work is going through, there are going to be hits and then healing. And then we
mhm,
have to look at, okay, well, where does healing come from?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so, yeah, I really appreciate your openness there. And so I'm curious to know as we come to a close, triumphs, Dory, as
Oh,
you look back and even in the now, as you look at the work that you are doing, what are some of the triumphs that stand out for you?
so I think for me, one of the big things that I'm feeling now, like I can tangibly feel coming back, is all the work that we did at OCAD to make the Black cluster hire happen, and the ripple effect that that's had in so many institutions. So like I was at one event and I was with the president of George Brown College, Jervan Firan, And he was just saying to me, like, Dory, after the Black cluster hire, York did it. He's just naming all the different universities in Canada and other that has taken the pattern and the possibilities that we opened through the Black cluster hire at OCAD and just replicated it. I'm seeing it in the States. I'm seeing it in, again, design institutions, not just in academia. And so being able to tangibly feel the ripple effect of that, and again, it's a community triumph, right? Like there's so many people who are necessary to make that successful, including all the people who applied for the position. Um, but to see how that shifted the possibilities and that others are now taking that as a model to make manifest diversity, inclusion, and decolonization, it's going to be one of the things that I will be always most proud of in terms of using all of my talents of persuasion and community building uh, to 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 create change for the Black community, but not just the Black community. Like this is a thing where it's like if you remove barriers for the Black community, others are able to follow through.
Mm.
Um, and this had to be built upon like removing barriers for Indigenous community because we had to have the first Indigenous cluster hire, right, to set the possibilities even for a Black cluster hire. So for me, that's like one of my biggest triumphs because it's the thing where, we have these amazing new 5 faculty members. So we doubled the number of Black faculty at OCAD. And they're all were selected for their desire to transform the institution and connect it deeper to community. And they're doing that. Like they're doing that work, which is great because it means I get to like lay back and just like let me write the checks. And that, for me, like from the tiredness perspective, like that's a good place to be, right? It's just like, let me write the checks to support you in whatever way. I'll make the call and open, but go run with this, right? Go run with this and make it happen.
Yes, absolutely. And Dory, it's been wonderful to witness, let me tell you. Those triumphs have been wonderful to
Mhm.
witness.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
that.
Thank you.
But before Dory goes, can you please share with us some words? I mean, you've already done it, but some words of wisdom, some last words rather, last words of wisdom that you would share with individuals who are aspiring to walk a similar walk, individuals who are aspiring to work in the area of diversity, inclusion, individuals who are aspiring to be educators.
Mhm.
Can you give some last words of wisdoms? Your share.
So my last sharing is find the fearlessness to be authentically yourself. The best thing that you can do as an educator, the best thing you can do as a community leader is to give people permission to be all of who they are. So finding the inner strength, inner understanding to practice that every day, like that's how you make the revolution happen.
Oh, okay. All right, Dory. Words of wisdom from Dori Tunstall. Dory, thank you so much for sharing
Thank you,
all
Nicole. I
who
so
you
enjoyed it.
are. And so did I. And so, listen, the dance class, when is that happening? I can't wait. As I let you go now, I can't wait to join that dance class. And of course, to get an opportunity to see the garden, even if it's on Instagram or wherever it has to be. But I am looking so forward to learning more, seeing more, witnessing more of all the beautiful work that you are doing in community. Thank you, Jory, for this time. It's been such a pleasure.
And again, thank you. I am because we are.
Amen to that. Amen. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. Dori Tunstall. What a pleasure it is to sit down with Dori this afternoon and talk, share, and learn And I hope you are able to, I know you are able to get some wonderful fruit as well from Dori. Dr. Dori Tunstall, Dean of Design at OCAD University. Thank you again for joining me today. And stay with us. We have so many more wonderful talks, discussions, and shares that are coming up right here at the AMANI Project. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton. I'll see you again very soon.